Assalamu alaikum. Tonight, I want you to listen to this with your heart. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that losing them felt like losing a part of yourself? You kept begging Allah to fix the relationship. You kept hoping they would finally change. You kept holding on to memories while your heart was quietly breaking behind the scenes. You missed their messages, their attention, their presence, but at the same time, you were becoming emotionally exhausted. Your peace disappeared. Your mind became full of overthinking. Your relationship with Allah became weaker, and your happiness slowly became dependent on another human being. You smiled in front of people, but deep inside, your heart felt heavy all the time. And maybe the most painful part is this: even after all the tears, all the disappointment, all the nights they made you feel unwanted, a part of you still wanted them back. Why? Because attachment can make the heart hold on to what is hurting it. But tonight, I need you to understand something powerful. Maybe losing them was not the real tragedy. Maybe the real tragedy was how much of yourself you lost trying to keep someone who was never meant to cost you your peace. Because somewhere in the middle of loving them, you stopped choosing yourself. You stopped protecting your heart. You stopped feeling emotionally safe. And little by little, you drifted away from the peace Allah wanted for you. And maybe that is why this heartbreak hurts so deeply. Not because Allah abandoned you, but because Allah is trying to bring you back to yourself before you disappear completely inside the wrong kind of love. Because sometimes you do not need the person back. You need your peace back, your worth back, your connection with Allah back. And tonight, we're going to talk about that. You slowly lost yourself, trying to keep someone who was never meant to cost you your peace. At first, it did not feel dangerous. It felt like love. You thought you were simply being patient with someone you cared about deeply. You kept telling yourself that every relationship has hard moments, misunderstandings, and emotional ups and downs. So whenever something hurt you, you tried to ignore it instead of facing it honestly. You noticed the inconsistency, but you stayed quiet. You noticed how their effort slowly changed, but you convinced yourself not to think too much about it. Sometimes they became cold without explanation. Sometimes they disappeared emotionally when you needed them most. Sometimes they made you feel loved one day and emotionally confused the next. But because your heart was attached, you kept trying to understand them instead of protecting yourself. You told yourself, maybe they are stressed. You said, maybe they are struggling emotionally. You hoped, maybe they will change with time. And slowly, without even realizing it, you started making excuses for things that were quietly breaking your heart. That is how emotional self-loss begins. Not loudly, not suddenly. It happens slowly, through small moments where you choose keeping the relationship over protecting your peace. You became more careful with your words because you were afraid of upsetting them. You started thinking too much before sending messages. You reread conversations in your mind for hours, wondering if you said something wrong. You became anxious over small changes in their behavior. A dry reply could ruin your mood. A delayed message could fill your heart with fear. You stopped feeling emotionally safe because your peace became connected to their attention. And the saddest part is that many people call this love. But love should never make you feel like you are constantly walking on emotional glass. Love should not make you afraid to speak honestly. Love should not force you to hide your feelings just to avoid being abandoned. Somewhere in the middle of trying to keep them, you stopped listening to yourself. You ignored your own emotional pain. You ignored the way your heart constantly felt heavy. You ignored how exhausted you were becoming. Instead of asking, why am I losing my peace? You kept asking, how do I stop them from leaving? That question slowly changed your entire emotional world. You stopped setting healthy boundaries because you feared distance. You accepted less effort because you feared loneliness. You tolerated things that once would have deeply bothered you because your heart became attached to the hope that one day things would finally become beautiful again. But unhealthy attachment can make people betray themselves emotionally while calling it loyalty. And this is why so many people lose themselves in relationships. They become so focused on being chosen by someone else that they stop choosing themselves. They stop protecting their dignity. They stop protecting their emotional peace. They stop protecting their relationship with Allah because their heart becomes completely consumed by the relationship. The truth is, when a connection constantly drains your peace, confuses your heart, and pulls you away from emotional stability, something is wrong. Allah did not create love to make you emotionally collapse every night. Real love brings sukoon. Real love brings clarity, honesty, safety, and emotional mercy. The right person will never make you feel like you must shrink yourself to be loved. They will never make you feel guilty for expressing your emotions respectfully. They will never make you feel that your worth depends on how useful or convenient you are to them. And maybe that is what hurts the most when the relationship ends. You realize you were fighting so hard not to lose them, that you slowly lost yourself in the process. But perhaps this heartbreak came to wake you up. Perhaps Allah allowed the pain because He saw how much of yourself you were abandoning just to keep a connection alive. Perhaps losing them was the beginning of finding yourself again. Because sometimes the person you miss the most is not actually them. Sometimes the person you truly miss is the version of yourself you were before the pain, before the anxiety, before the emotional exhaustion, and before you forgot your own worth. You started measuring your worth through their attention, messages, and validation. At some point, without fully realizing it, your emotional world started revolving around them. Their attention became your comfort. Their messages became your source of happiness. Their approval became the thing that decided whether you felt loved, valuable, or emotionally secure. One good morning text could instantly make your heart feel light again. One late reply could fill your chest with anxiety. One dry message could ruin your entire mood for the rest of the day. And when they suddenly became warm again after being distant, your heart would hold on to those small moments like they were proof that everything was finally okay. This is how emotional attachment slowly takes control of a person. You stop living from inner peace, and you start living from emotional reactions. Your emotions begin depending on another human being's consistency, attention, and validation. You wake up checking your phone, hoping to hear from them. You sleep replaying conversations in your head. You stare at old messages, trying to feel close to them again. You search for hidden meanings in short replies. You overanalyze every silence, every delay, every small change in energy. And slowly, your emotional stability disappears. Because when your heart becomes too dependent on someone's attention, peace becomes impossible. Your emotions start moving up and down based on how they treat you. If they are loving, you feel worthy. If they become distant, you suddenly feel forgotten. If they pull away emotionally, you start questioning yourself. You wonder if you are not attractive enough, good enough, interesting enough, or important enough. That is one of the most painful things unhealthy attachment does to the heart. It makes you forget that your value never came from another person's attention in the first place. Many people think they are simply in love, but in reality, they have become emotionally dependent. There is a difference between loving someone and needing someone's validation to feel okay emotionally. Love should add peace to your life, not make you emotionally collapse every time someone changes their mood. And sadly, this emotional dependency becomes stronger when someone gives inconsistent affection. One day they make you feel special. The next day they become cold. One moment they speak with care. The next moment they disappear emotionally. This creates confusion inside the heart because your mind keeps chasing the return of the warmth you once felt. You become attached not only to the person, but to the hope of getting that feeling back again. That is why some people stay emotionally trapped for so long. Not because the relationship is healthy, but because their heart became addicted to the small moments of affection inside all the emotional pain. They keep waiting for things to return to how they used to be. They keep hoping that one day the inconsistency will stop and the love will finally feel secure again. But real love should never make you feel emotionally hungry all the time. The right person will not make you beg for reassurance while giving you the bare minimum. They will not leave you constantly wondering where you stand in their life. They will not make you feel that your worth depends on how useful, attractive, or emotionally available you are to them. And this is why so many heartbreaks feel deeper than just losing a relationship. Because sometimes you did not only lose a person, you lost the emotional identity you built around being loved by them. You became so attached to being chosen by them that when the connection broke, it felt like your self-worth broke too. But Allah never wanted your heart to depend completely on another human being. Because people are imperfect, people change, people disappoint, people leave. Even good people can fail emotionally sometimes. That is why Allah reminds us again and again to keep our hearts connected to Him first. Because only Allah remains constant when everything else changes. When your worth depends only on people, your heart will always live in fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. But when your heart remembers that your value comes from Allah, something inside you begins healing. You stop begging for attention that should come naturally. You stop chasing people who make you question your worth. You stop trying to prove yourself to someone who cannot see your value clearly. And slowly, your heart starts returning to peace again. Because your worth was never hidden inside their messages, their replies, or their ability to choose you. Your worth existed long before they entered your life. And it will still exist even after they are gone. Your heart became so attached to them that you slowly drifted away from Allah. One of the most painful things about unhealthy attachment is that it does not only affect your emotions. Slowly, quietly, it begins affecting your relationship with Allah too. At first, you do not notice it happening. You still pray. You still believe. You still say Alhamdulillah and Insha'Allah. But deep inside, your emotional world starts revolving around a person more than your creator. Your mind becomes full of them, from morning until night. You wake up thinking about their messages. You sleep replaying conversations in your head. Your happiness depends on how they treat you. Your sadness depends on their distance. Your peace depends on their attention. And little by little, your heart becomes emotionally attached to them in a way that was only meant for Allah. You start running to them emotionally before running to Allah. You seek comfort in their words more than in dua. You wait for their reassurance more than you wait for Allah's guidance. Their presence calms you temporarily, but the moment they become distant, your heart collapses again. That is because no human being was created to carry the emotional weight your soul was meant to place upon Allah. Only Allah can hold a heart completely without breaking it. People are limited. Human beings change. Feelings change. Attention changes. Effort changes. Even sincere people can disappoint us because humans are imperfect by nature. But Allah never changes. Allah never abandons. Allah never becomes emotionally unavailable. Allah never gets tired of listening to your pain. Yet sometimes, when we become deeply attached to someone, we slowly begin expecting from them what only Allah can truly provide. You begin expecting complete emotional security from a person, complete healing from a person, complete peace from a person. And when they fail to give that consistently, your heart becomes restless, anxious, and emotionally exhausted. That exhaustion is often a sign that your soul is drifting away from its true center. Many people do not realize this, but sometimes heartbreak hurts so deeply because the relationship slowly became an emotional idol inside the heart. The person became too important, too central, too emotionally powerful. You checked your phone more than you checked your relationship with Allah. You cried more over their silence than over your distance from your deen. Your thoughts became consumed by the relationship while your soul quietly became emptier and emptier inside. And this is not said to shame anyone. It happens to many people, especially when they are emotionally vulnerable, lonely, or searching for love and comfort. Sometimes a person enters your life during a weak moment, and because they gave you attention, affection, or emotional warmth, your heart starts holding on to them too tightly. You begin believing they are the answer to your emptiness. You think if they stay, everything inside you will finally feel okay. But the human heart was never designed to find complete peace through another person. Real peace begins when the heart returns to Allah. That is why Allah sometimes removes people we desperately wanted to keep, not because He wants to punish us, but because He sees what our attachment is doing to us spiritually. Allah sees the anxiety growing inside you. Allah sees how emotionally dependent you have become. Allah sees how much of your peace is now controlled by another human being. And because Allah loves you, sometimes He breaks the attachment before it completely breaks you. At the time, it feels cruel. It feels unfair. You cry at night wondering why the relationship had to end. You beg Allah to bring them back. You replay memories over and over again because your heart cannot accept the loss. But later, after enough healing, many people finally understand something powerful. The relationship was not only taking away their peace, it was slowly taking away their connection with Allah too. Because when your heart becomes too attached to dunya, Allah sometimes allows disappointment to pull you back toward Him. And strangely, many people become closer to Allah after heartbreak than they ever were during the relationship itself. You start making sincere dua again. You start praying with real tears again. You start realizing how much emotional energy you gave to someone who could never fully heal your heart. You begin understanding that no love feels complete when Allah is missing from the center of it. And slowly, your soul starts breathing again. You stop chasing people to fill emotional emptiness. You stop begging human beings for the kind of peace only Allah can give. You stop believing your future happiness depends entirely on one person staying in your life. Instead, your heart slowly learns tawakkul, trust, surrender, emotional reliance upon Allah. And that changes everything. Because when Allah becomes the center of your heart again, people no longer control your peace the same way. You still love, you still care deeply, but your soul no longer collapses when human beings disappoint you, because your heart is rooted in something greater than people. The truth is, the person you were crying over may never have had the power to complete you in the first place. Maybe Allah allowed the heartbreak because your soul was becoming too dependent on something temporary, and perhaps losing them was not Allah abandoning you. Perhaps it was Allah calling your heart back home. You mistook emotional chaos, anxiety, and attachment for real love. One of the biggest reasons people stay trapped in painful relationships is because they confuse emotional intensity with real love. When emotions feel strong, the heart assumes the connection must be special. You think, if I feel this deeply for them, then this must be real. But deep feelings alone do not always mean something is healthy. Sometimes the strongest emotional attachments are the ones hurting you the most. Many unhealthy relationships survive because they create emotional chaos that feels addictive. One day, the person gives you attention, affection, and warmth. They make you feel deeply wanted. They say things that touch your heart. They make you believe you finally found someone who understands you emotionally. But then suddenly, they become distant. Their energy changes. Their effort changes. Their tone changes. And your heart immediately falls into confusion. You start asking yourself questions all day. Did I do something wrong? Why are they acting differently? Why do they suddenly feel cold? And because you are emotionally attached, you become desperate to return to the emotional warmth they once gave you. This creates a dangerous emotional cycle. Their affection becomes your emotional high. Their distance becomes your emotional pain. And without realizing it, your nervous system becomes addicted to the emotional ups and downs of the relationship. That is why some people think about someone every minute of the day and mistake it for love. But constantly thinking about someone does not always mean your soul is at peace with them. Sometimes it simply means your heart is trapped in anxiety, attachment, confusion, and emotional dependency. Real love should not feel like emotional survival. Real love should not leave you constantly overthinking where you stand in someone's life. Real love should not make you cry yourself to sleep while still begging Allah to keep the relationship alive. Real love should not make you feel emotionally unstable every time someone changes their mood. But many people grew up around unhealthy examples of love, so emotional chaos starts feeling normal to them. They think jealousy means love. They think anxiety means passion. They think emotional obsession means deep connection. So when a relationship feels calm, safe, and emotionally stable, they sometimes even mistake it for boring because their heart became used to emotional instability. That is one of the saddest effects of unhealthy attachment. It trains the heart to chase emotional chaos while ignoring emotional peace. You started believing that pain was proof of love. You thought, if I'm hurting this much, then what I feel must be real. But pain alone does not make something pure. Obsession does not make something healthy. Emotional dependency does not make something sacred. Sometimes what people call love is actually fear of abandonment. Sometimes it is loneliness attaching itself to attention. Sometimes it is emotional emptiness trying to hold on to anyone who temporarily makes it feel less alone. And because your heart was starving for emotional closeness, you held on to small moments of affection like they were everything. You ignored the sleepless nights. You ignored the anxiety. You ignored the emotional confusion. You ignored how exhausted your heart constantly felt, because you became addicted to the temporary moments where they finally made you feel loved again. This is why toxic emotional cycles are so difficult to leave. The heart keeps chasing the next moment of warmth, hoping this time things will finally become stable. But real love does not constantly leave you emotionally starving. The right person will not make you beg for reassurance every day. They will not confuse you so much that your mental peace disappears. They will not leave you wondering whether you matter to them. Real love protects your dignity. Real love protects your emotional safety. Real love brings sukoon into your life instead of emotional exhaustion. And this is something many people only understand after heartbreak. When the relationship finally ends and the emotional fog slowly clears, you begin realizing how anxious you truly were the entire time. You realize how much emotional energy was spent chasing clarity, reassurance, consistency, and peace from someone who could never fully provide it. You realize you were not emotionally calm in the relationship. You were emotionally attached to the hope that one day things would finally feel safe. That realization changes people deeply, because now you stop romanticizing the pain. You stop confusing suffering with love. You stop believing that emotional obsession is proof of destiny. And slowly, your heart starts learning what healthy love actually looks like. Healthy love does not pull you away from Allah. Healthy love does not destroy your self-worth. Healthy love does not make you abandon yourself emotionally. Healthy love feels peaceful, clear, respectful, consistent. It allows your heart to rest instead of constantly panic. And maybe that is why Allah removed certain people from your life, because your heart was calling emotional chaos love, while Allah wanted to teach you what real peace actually feels like. Because the love written for you by Allah will never require you to lose your mind just to keep it alive. Losing them forced you to face the parts of yourself you had been avoiding. When the relationship finally started breaking apart, something inside you probably felt terrified. Not only because you were losing someone you loved, but because deep down, you knew you were about to face a version of yourself you had been avoiding for a very long time. During the relationship, your mind was constantly occupied. You were always thinking about them, worrying about them, waiting for them, trying to fix things, trying to feel close to them again. The emotional noise of the connection became a distraction from your deeper pain. But when they left, or when the relationship became distant, the silence suddenly became loud. No more waiting for messages every hour. No more emotional highs and lows distracting your heart. No more temporary moments of affection covering the emptiness inside. It was just you, your thoughts, your loneliness, your fears, your wounds. And for many people, that is the hardest part of heartbreak. Because heartbreak has a painful way of exposing the emotional pain we were trying to escape through attachment. Sometimes we think we are only grieving the person, but in reality, we are also facing all the hidden emotions the relationship helped us avoid. The fear of abandonment, the fear of not being enough, the fear of being left behind, the fear of being unloved. That is why heartbreak can feel so overwhelming at night. The distractions disappear, and suddenly your soul starts speaking honestly again. You begin remembering how emotionally exhausted you truly were. You begin noticing how much anxiety you were carrying every day. You realize how much of your emotional energy was spent trying to hold together something that was slowly breaking you from the inside. And for the first time in a long time, you are forced to sit with yourself honestly. That can feel terrifying, because many people use relationships to escape themselves. They seek constant attention because they are uncomfortable being alone. They chase emotional closeness because silence forces them to confront wounds they have never healed. They become deeply attached because attachment temporarily numbs inner emptiness. But Allah sometimes removes the distraction so healing can finally begin. And this is why some heartbreaks change people forever. Not because they lost someone, but because the pain forced them to wake up emotionally. You start asking deeper questions, questions you never asked while chasing the relationship. Why was I accepting so little? Why was I so afraid of being left? Why did I ignore my own pain for so long? Why did I depend so much on another person for peace? These questions hurt, but they also begin healing you, because now your focus slowly changes. You stop asking only, how do I get them back? And you begin asking, how do I become emotionally whole again? That is where real healing starts. Not when the other person returns, not when you receive closure, not when they finally apologize. Healing begins when you stop abandoning yourself emotionally. And one of the most beautiful things about this painful stage is that it slowly reconnects you with Allah again. Because when human support disappears, many hearts finally turn back to the one who never left them. You begin making dua with sincerity again. You begin crying to Allah honestly again. You begin realizing that maybe your soul became too attached to temporary things because it was spiritually empty inside. And slowly, through the heartbreak, Allah starts rebuilding parts of you that were broken long before the relationship even began. He teaches you that your worth is not based on who stays. He teaches you that loneliness is not the same as failure. He teaches you that emotional pain can either destroy you or bring you closer to Him. And perhaps the hardest truth to accept is this: sometimes you were not only attached to the person, you were attached to the version of yourself you became around them. The hope, the future you imagined, the feeling of being wanted, the dream of finally being loved the way your heart always desired. So when the relationship ended, it felt like those dreams died too. But Allah often removes false comfort to make room for something real. Sometimes He allows your heart to break because He wants to heal parts of you that comfort and distraction were hiding for years. And slowly, after enough tears, enough prayer, and enough healing, you begin noticing something beautiful happening inside yourself. You start becoming emotionally stronger. You start depending less on people's validation. You start protecting your peace more carefully. You start seeing your own value again. You stop chasing people who cannot love you properly. And perhaps for the first time in your life, you begin understanding that healing is not about becoming cold or emotionless. Healing is about returning to yourself, returning to your dignity, returning to emotional peace, returning to Allah, because maybe losing them was not the end of your story. Maybe it was the beginning of finally finding yourself again after years of emotionally disappearing inside the wrong kind of love. Allah may have removed them because your future peace mattered more than your temporary feelings. One of the hardest truths to accept after heartbreak is this: sometimes the person you were crying over was someone Allah was protecting you from. At the time, your emotions cannot understand it. Your heart only sees the attachment, the memories, the late-night conversations, the moments that felt beautiful, and the future you imagined together. You keep thinking, if this relationship ended, then why did it feel so real? You wonder why Allah allowed your heart to become attached if the person was never meant to stay. But human beings see only a small part of the story. We see emotions. Allah sees consequences. We see chemistry. Allah sees character. We see what makes us feel emotionally attached in the moment. Allah sees what will either protect or destroy our peace years later. That is why sometimes Allah removes people from our lives while we are still begging Him to keep them. And during that stage, the pain feels unbearable. You keep making dua for the relationship to return. You replay memories in your mind constantly. You search for signs that maybe things will work out again. You hold on to hope because your emotions are still deeply attached. But while you are crying over losing the relationship, Allah may already be saving you from a future your heart cannot yet see clearly. Maybe Allah saw the emotional damage slowly growing inside you. Maybe Allah saw how anxious you had become. Maybe He saw how much of your self-worth you were sacrificing just to keep the connection alive. Maybe He saw how emotionally exhausted you were becoming while pretending everything was okay. Sometimes we become so attached to people that we stop noticing how much they are hurting us. You become used to inconsistency. You become used to emotional confusion. You become used to carrying the entire relationship emotionally by yourself. And because your heart is attached, you keep focusing on the small moments of happiness while ignoring the constant emotional pain surrounding them. But Allah sees everything your heart ignores. Allah sees the tears you never told anyone about. Allah sees the anxiety hidden behind your smile. Allah sees the nights you cried yourself to sleep because someone made you feel emotionally unwanted while still keeping you attached enough not to leave. And because Allah loves you, sometimes He closes a door your emotions desperately wanted open, not because He wants to punish you, not because you are unworthy of love, but because your future peace matters more than your temporary attachment. That is something many people only understand later. At first, heartbreak feels like destruction. It feels like Allah took away the one thing your heart wanted most. You feel abandoned emotionally. You feel confused. You feel empty. But then time passes, and slowly, the emotional fog begins clearing. You start seeing things you were blind to before. You realize how much overthinking controlled your life during the relationship. You realize how emotionally unstable you became. You realize how much effort you gave just to receive basic consistency. You realize how often you ignored your own pain just to avoid losing the person. And eventually, a painful but powerful realization enters your heart. The relationship was costing you too much. Your peace, your confidence, your emotional stability, your relationship with Allah, your ability to feel safe emotionally. And slowly, your heartbreak transforms into understanding. You begin realizing that not every closed door is a loss. Sometimes a closed door is mercy hidden inside pain. There are people we beg Allah to keep in our lives while Allah, in His wisdom, knows they are not written for our long-term peace. And because our hearts are emotional, we cannot understand it immediately. That is why Tawakkul is so important. Tawakkul means trusting that Allah sees what you cannot see. Trusting that Allah understands people better than your emotions do. Trusting that if Allah removes something, there is wisdom behind the loss, even if your heart cannot understand it yet. And perhaps one of the most beautiful moments in healing is when you stop asking, "Why did Allah take them away?" and you begin asking, "What was Allah protecting me from?" That question changes everything, because now your pain starts carrying meaning. You begin understanding that maybe Allah was protecting you from a future filled with emotional exhaustion. Maybe He was protecting your deen. Maybe He was protecting your dignity. Maybe He was protecting your heart from becoming even more attached to someone who could never truly give you the peace you deserved. And one day, many people look back at the relationship they once begged Allah for and whisper with tears in their eyes, "Ya Allah, thank you for not giving me what I thought I needed." Because later, they finally meet peace again. They finally sleep without anxiety. They finally stop checking their phone every few minutes. They finally stop feeling emotionally unstable all the time. They finally reconnect with Allah deeply. They finally remember who they were before the heartbreak consumed them. And in that moment, they realize something powerful. What felt like rejection was sometimes protection. What felt like loss was sometimes mercy. What felt like heartbreak was sometimes Allah saving their soul before the attachment destroyed them completely. The truth is, Allah does not remove people because He wants your life to become empty. Sometimes He removes the wrong people because He knows your heart deserves a love that will not make peace feel impossible. And the love written by Allah will never require you to destroy yourself emotionally just to keep it alive. Healing began the moment you stopped chasing the person who kept wounding your heart. There comes a moment in heartbreak where your soul becomes tired, not just sad, not just disappointed, tired. Tired of overthinking every conversation, tired of checking your phone hoping their name appears again, tired of replaying memories at night while trying to understand what went wrong, tired of carrying emotional pain for someone who kept giving you confusion instead of clarity. And slowly, after enough tears and emotional exhaustion, something inside you begins changing. You realize you cannot spend the rest of your life chasing people who keep hurting your heart. At first, letting go feels impossible. Your emotions still hold on to the relationship. Your mind still remembers the good moments. Your heart still hopes they will suddenly change, return, apologize, or finally become the person you needed them to be. That is why healing takes time. Because healing is not simply forgetting someone. Healing is slowly teaching your heart to stop depending on what keeps damaging it. and that process hurts deeply. There will be nights where you miss them, even though you know they hurt you. There will be moments where loneliness makes you romanticize memories while forgetting the emotional pain attached to them. There will be times where your heart wants to return simply because familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar healing. But every time you choose not to chase what broke you, your soul becomes a little stronger. That is where healing quietly begins. Not when the pain disappears completely, not when they suddenly regret losing you, not when you finally get closure from them. Healing begins when you stop abandoning yourself emotionally for people who keep showing you inconsistency. And one of the hardest parts of healing is accepting that some people will never become who you hoped they would become. You saw potential in them. You saw goodness in them. You saw the version of them you kept praying would eventually appear. But you cannot build your future around potential while ignoring reality. Reality is how someone treats your heart consistently. Reality is whether they protect your peace or destroy it. Reality is whether they pull you closer to Allah or deeper into anxiety and emotional confusion. And slowly, your heart starts understanding something painful but freeing. You cannot heal in the same place that keeps hurting you. That realization changes everything. Because now, instead of chasing temporary attention, you begin protecting your peace. Instead of begging for emotional reassurance, you begin rebuilding your self-worth. Instead of constantly reopening wounds, you begin allowing Allah to heal the parts of your heart that people kept damaging. And little by little, life starts feeling lighter again. You stop checking their profile every hour. You stop waiting all day for one message. You stop creating fake hope from small signs and mixed signals. You stop making excuses for behavior that hurts you, not because you stopped caring overnight, but because your soul finally became exhausted from suffering. And when the emotional fog slowly clears, you begin noticing something beautiful. You can breathe again. You start sleeping with less anxiety. You start waking up without immediately thinking about them. Your heart begins feeling calm in moments that once felt unbearable. You laugh naturally again. You reconnect with friends, family, and parts of yourself you neglected, while emotionally chasing someone who could not love you properly. That is one of the most beautiful parts of healing. You slowly return to yourself. The version of you that existed before the heartbreak consumed your mind. The version of you that smiled without constantly needing reassurance. The version of you that trusted Allah without making another human being the center of your emotional world. And perhaps the most powerful change happens when you finally stop seeing your worth through the eyes of the person who hurt you. You stop asking, why wasn't I enough for them? And you begin realizing, maybe I was sacrificing too much just to be loved by someone who was never emotionally ready to value me properly. That realization is painful, but it is also freeing, because now your healing is no longer about getting someone back. It becomes about getting your peace back, your dignity back, your emotional stability back, your relationship with Allah back. And through this process, Allah teaches you something incredibly important. Protecting your heart is not weakness. Walking away from emotional harm is not selfishness. Choosing peace over emotional chaos is not giving up on love. It is wisdom. Many people stay trapped in pain because they believe suffering proves loyalty. They think constantly hurting for someone means the love is deep and meaningful. But Islam does not teach us to destroy ourselves emotionally for relationships that continuously damage our hearts. Allah does not want you living in constant anxiety, confusion, and emotional instability while calling it love. Real love should make your heart feel safe enough to rest. And perhaps this heartbreak was not only about losing someone. Perhaps it was Allah teaching you the difference between attachment and peace. Because attachment makes you chase what hurts you, but peace brings you closer to Allah, closer to yourself, and closer to emotional safety. And maybe that is why healing finally began the moment you stopped running after the person who kept wounding your heart and started returning to the parts of yourself that needed love, mercy, and healing the most. In the end, you didn't need them to return. You needed to return to yourself and Allah. After all the heartbreak, all the overthinking, all the tears, all the nights you spent wondering why they changed, you slowly begin realizing something that changes your entire life. You were never truly begging for just the person. You were begging for the feelings you thought they gave you. The feeling of being wanted, the feeling of being chosen, the feeling of finally being enough for someone. But somewhere inside that attachment, you forgot something incredibly important. You forgot yourself. You forgot the version of yourself that once had peace before the emotional confusion began. You forgot the version of yourself that smiled naturally before anxiety became part of your daily life. You forgot how emotionally light your heart once felt before it became consumed by chasing reassurance, consistency, and love from another human being. And perhaps that is the deepest pain of unhealthy attachment. Not losing the person, but losing yourself while trying to keep them. You stopped prioritizing your emotional peace. You stopped protecting your dignity. You stopped listening to the pain inside your heart because you were too focused on keeping the relationship alive. You gave so much emotional energy trying to save the connection that eventually there was very little energy left for yourself. And the heartbreaking part is that many people do not notice this until the relationship finally ends. Only then do they realize how emotionally drained they truly became. They realize how much of their confidence disappeared. They realize how much anxiety became normal. They realize how disconnected they became from Allah, from inner peace, and from their own identity. But sometimes Allah allows the heartbreak because He wants to wake you up before you completely lose yourself. Because Allah did not create you to spend your life begging for love from people who cannot value your heart properly. Allah did not create your soul to live in constant emotional confusion. Allah did not create love to feel like endless exhaustion, fear, and emotional instability. Real love should not make you disappear. Real love should bring you closer to who you truly are. It should bring peace into your life, not constant panic. It should strengthen your relationship with Allah, not weaken it. It should protect your dignity, not slowly destroy it. And this is why, after enough healing, many people finally understand that the greatest thing they lost was never the relationship. The greatest thing they lost was themselves. They lost their emotional balance. They lost their peace. They lost their confidence. They lost the healthy connection they once had with Allah. And perhaps that is why healing feels so powerful later on. Because healing is not only about moving on from a person, healing is about returning to yourself. Returning to the version of yourself that no longer accepts emotional confusion as love. Returning to the version of yourself that understands your worth does not decrease because someone failed to recognize it. Returning to the version of yourself that trusts Allah enough not to chase what destroys your peace. And most importantly, returning to Allah. Because when your heart reconnects deeply with Allah again, something beautiful happens inside you. You stop depending completely on people for emotional survival. You stop making another human being the center of your happiness. You stop believing your future is ruined because one relationship ended. Instead, your heart slowly becomes softer, wiser, and stronger. You begin understanding that what Allah removes can never be greater than what Allah can replace. You begin realizing that some heartbreaks are not meant to destroy your future. They are meant to rebuild your soul. And one day, you will look back at the version of yourself that begged for someone who kept hurting you, and your heart will feel emotional for a different reason, not because they left, but because you finally understand how much pain you tolerated while calling it love. And maybe for the first time in your life, you will stop chasing people who make you question your worth. You will stop begging for reassurance from hearts that cannot love consistently. You will stop sacrificing your emotional peace just to avoid loneliness, because your heart finally learns this truth. Being alone with peace is far better than being emotionally destroyed inside the wrong relationship. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this entire journey is that Allah never abandoned you during any of it. Even during the nights you cried over someone more than you cried in dua, Allah was still listening. Even during the moments you felt emotionally broken and spiritually distant, Allah was still near. Even when your heart became attached to someone who could not carry the weight of your emotions, Allah still loved you enough to guide you back toward Him through the pain. That is mercy. Sometimes Allah removes people because He knows your heart deserves a love that will not require you to betray yourself emotionally. A love that will not make you lose your peace. A love that will not pull you away from your deen. A love that will feel calm, respectful, honest, and emotionally safe. And until that love arrives, perhaps Allah is teaching you the most important lesson of all. Your value was never hidden inside another person's ability to choose you. Your value comes from Allah, not from their attention, not from their messages, not from whether they stayed or left. You were valuable before they entered your life, and you will still be valuable long after they are gone. So maybe the healing was never about getting them back. Maybe the real healing was finally returning to yourself, returning to your peace, and returning to Allah. Maybe tonight, there is someone listening to this with tears in their eyes. Someone who spent months begging Allah to fix a relationship while slowly breaking themselves in the process. Someone who kept trying to hold on to a person, even when the connection was destroying their peace. And maybe that person is you. If it is, then listen carefully. You are not hard to love. You are not too emotional. You are not unworthy because someone failed to protect your heart properly. Sometimes people leave because Allah knows they were never meant to carry your future. And sometimes heartbreak is not Allah abandoning you. It is Allah saving you before you completely lose yourself. One day, inshallah, your heart will feel light again. One day, you will stop checking your phone, hoping for their name. One day, you will smile without forcing it. One day, you will realize that the peace you were begging from another human being was always waiting for you with Allah. And maybe years from now, you will look back at this heartbreak with tears in your eyes and whisper, Ya Allah, thank you for not letting me stay where I was, slowly losing myself. Because the right love will never make you abandon your peace to keep it alive. The love written by Allah will feel calm, clear, safe, merciful. And until that day comes, do not chase what destroys your heart. Let Allah heal you. Let Allah rebuild you. Let Allah return you to the version of yourself that existed before the pain. Because you did not need to lose yourself to be loved. And you never needed another person to prove your worth. Allah already gave you value long before anyone entered your life.